Welcome to Leveraging Cyber Risk and Threat Management for better visibility and security into your business. My name is Zack Moore. I am the Senior Product Manager over cybersecurity here at InterVision. I've been with the company since 2008, and I've had a variety of roles, including leading our SOC, leading our cybersecurity development practice, and working in our operations center as an escalation engineer on the security side. And with me, I'm joined by Brian Berger of Cytellix. Brian, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm the president of Cytellix, and I've been here since the beginning, built the platform and the technology over the past 8 years, and foundationally looked at the risk and threat business as the thesis for our business. And we're here to talk a little bit about some of those capabilities, not necessarily the product, but the market and the subject matter for this conversation today.
Fantastic. And today we're going to talk about leveraging cyber threat and cyber risk management services to strengthen your security and compliance, especially in highly regulated industries such as healthcare, manufacturing, government, and things like that. So to kick off, why don't we start by talking about what some of the key aspects of cyber risk versus cyber threat management is and what the difference are between the two.
Yeah, so the market looks at these two things distinctly different today, and customers do as well. And they put them into categories, so market segmentation. So we talk about threat management under things like MDR, managed detection response, extended detection response, and the tooling associated with that. And under the cyber risk side, we talk about governance, risk, and compliance, or GRC. And the foundation of the risk side is starting to look at where an organization is from meeting a regulatory compliance under cybersecurity, but more fundamentally about protecting information. So most of those frameworks around risk really start to look at how do you protect information from being lost, and do you have the appropriate policies, procedures, technology configurations, and awareness of who is on your network or who's coming into your network. And so that starts to really create something that we use as terminology, cyber hygiene. And the cyber posture, cyber hygiene of an organization is defined by aspects of where the organization is from a compliance perspective, what doors are open, what doors are closed from a simplistic perspective, and then how was the organization designed to protect information? And that is a complete view and should provide visibility around governance, risk, and compliance, or cyber risk.
Absolutely. Sort of marrying together that proactive and reactive to both prepare to address threats and then to actually react to them when they occur. That makes a ton of sense. So how would you distinguish then for the teams out there how you differentiate both within your organization or within customer organizations between cybersecurity versus IT and IT stack security?
Yeah, so cybersecurity starts to take in a broader view of the overall attack surface for the organization. And so the attack surface could be anything from an individual to a system to a cloud environment to behavior of a user of some of the information technology. And where IT and the IT security team looks at system uptime, system deployment, application management, and other aspects of both IT and IT security, including help desk, password resets, and they get the first call if there's a cyber event as well. So merging the two into best practices and having both an understanding of how the behaviors should be in the organization and the systems to how the systems are deployed. And if there's a mismatch, that's where cyber risk or cybersecurity best practice start to come into play. Because what we see typically is the tooling is being purchased. So whether it's an MFA solution or other, or a logging system, but the configuration management around best practices and the overall maintenance of those solutions, because cyber is a continually changing situation today in the market. uh, Being on top of that and making sure that the systems are patched or updated or configured properly become a mismatch between the two aspects of these conversations.
Absolutely. And I've seen it time and time again that as IT organizations adopt better cybersecurity practices, their ability to deliver outcomes to their own organization also improve because they utilize more of their tools. They have better and more consistent and easier to manage policies and things like that as well. So compliance doesn't just have to be a drag on business, and making sure that you have managed risk and better tools and processes in place doesn't have to just be a cost. It can be a benefit to the organization.
Totally agree.
Great. So I'm going to move on and let's talk about what are some key steps that organizations should take when they're looking to achieve a robust risk and threat management program.
So I've always talked about this with Gartner and a lot of industry colleagues around the the concept of understanding the overall risk to an organization before deploying security tooling. So understand the cyber posture first. And so some of those recommendations are to do an assessment, understand the risk, whether that's vulnerability management on one side, to kind of a network design review to understand if the network will protect information properly, to understanding what assets are on the network, how those assets are behaving. Are they talking to bad actors through threat intelligence? Is there any leakage within the systems themselves? So leak detection type of methodology, and an overall practical assessment using one of the frameworks, which is a recommendation that can I really identify weaknesses in the organization. What we find is organizations that start to button themselves up on the risk side have a much lower profile from an attack surface perspective on the threat side. So it's actually, we see it documented time and time again in the SOC, which is that organizations that really work their risk management or compliance piece have a lot less attacks on their organization and a lot less incidents that have to be dealt with. And so that convergence of risk and threat has become really a best practice. And it also saves an organization money, so they're not buying tooling that they're trying to apply to a problem that they don't necessarily know they have yet. And so that you start to bring together a practical approach to cost management, which also brings back the ability to reduce the amount of threats and attacks in the organization, which also saves money. So these things coming together is a really high value.
So it sounds like some of to summarize, some of the key points are first step, know what you have, know your inventory, know your policy, know what compliance frameworks you have to go against today, and understand those controls, and start mapping where your organization is so that you can prepare that roadmap to how you get the road to good, better, best, depending on where you are right now. And then also making sure that as you're looking at tooling and adoption, whatever you're looking at is both reducing your attack surface and reducing your risk to make sure you have a robust program. That makes a
Absolutely.
lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. You mentioned tools and technology in there. What kind of cybersecurity and governance tools are you seeing used in highly regulated industries?
So I'd say it's pretty horizontal across both regulated and unregulated markets. There's some pretty standard tooling that most organizations should use just as basic protection. Things like MFA, so multi-factor authentication I mentioned earlier, endpoint protection of some sort. There's more advanced levels of that with next-gen antivirus and threat detection models on the endpoint. So there's capabilities there. Log source management is pretty important to understand if data is moving through the network or out of the network, and when it moved. So there's some techniques around this to understand user behavior and device or entity behavior that are built into some of these log source managers. Um, Vulnerability management probably rises to the surface today in conversations. So being able to understand vulnerabilities and do patching, vulnerabilities are a key source of attack. Historically, we've talked about user behavior and user training around email behavior. Still important, um, but I think everybody's kind of been through that conversation around, ransomware and malware in emails and understands behavioral policies better, but making sure those are continued to be enforced. Um, and then threat intelligence, I'd say, is another basic capability that's available very readily to understand if um, anything within the organization that's connected to the network or the internet is talking to a bad actor. So that gives an indicator of compromise very quickly versus after the fact. And we're big proponents of, you know, identify the threat as early in the kill chain as possible, or even be proactive on the information known about the network and say we should be doing some proactive remediation or patching for the organization so we prevent compromises in the future. So there's some very basic things. There's conversations about encryption and conversations about key management and IDS, IPS on the firewalls, all very important, but there's some very basic safeguards that should go in first.
It makes a lot of sense. From what we've been discussing so far, it sounds like I can map all the recommendations and all the tooling we've got so far to a common framework that I'm seeing a lot, which is NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0. So you've got your identify, which is where you go out and you find out what you have. You identify where the crown jewels and the important data is, what users are talking to what tools you have in place. You got your protect, which is where you deploy your new tools and you defend the organization. You put the guardrails in place. You patch vulnerabilities, things like that. Into detect, which is where you're looking for the bad guys as they try and break in, because no matter how robust your vulnerability management or your ability to prepare is, a determined actor will eventually get in. Respond, ability to go in and talk about what is happening, where it's happening, and cut the enemy off the legs, and then recover, go back and make sure that you have processes in place so that after an attack has been limited and contained, you can get back to normal. And of course, all of that is wrapped in with that wrapper of governance. So best practice policy, all of your compliance, which is we've talked about at length and things like that. Make sure that everyone's marched at the same drumbeat. All right, great. Um, so let's look away. What would you say like top 3, 4 takeaways for someone to take away from this conversation so far? Most important points of what they want to look into, what they want to do next in order to advance their cybersecurity, cyber risk, cyber threat management programs.
Yeah, I'd still lean in on the understand part before making a purchase of any type. And if you can understand your organization's complete risk and have a goal of visibility. So I think there's two areas of conversation that need to occur more naturally amongst organizations looking at cyber risk and cyber threat, which is I need to know what I look like and I need to be able to see it. I think that those two things need to occur. And seeing cybersecurity is a complicated ask. but visibility of knowing where my risks are, knowing where my vulnerabilities are, knowing my cyber posture, knowing if I'm under attack, from a visibility perspective, are critical asks in the pursuit of whatever level of cybersecurity um, compliance or threat management on the other side that the organization is trying to do. But as quickly as possible, get that understanding and then start closing doors. And
Absolutely.
we like to look at things like classic terminology like plans of actions and milestones or POAMs is a um, checklist of what is my risk, what is my action against that risk, and is it closed and who owns it. And if you can punch down those based on priority or severity, using a different word, uh, it's really going to help the organization. And then the acquisition side of tooling you can apply towards that punch list.
Yep, absolutely. It all comes back towards identification and setting goals. And not everyone's under a specific compliance framework that's regulated by a government entity, but there's plenty out there, like Zero Trust, which is unregulated, but best practice for just about everyone, no matter your industry. All right, let's look ahead a little bit. What do you think the future of GRC is for regulated or unregulated industries?
So I think the guidance is going to become very, very strong in all industries around using a cybersecurity framework to measure an organization's health. And so I think that's foundational, whether they're regulated or not. We see, as you said, CSF in cross industry. We see the CIS 20 as another one that's cross industry, a little bit more, I would say, general purpose. And then we see vertical markets. Healthcare, we've known about HIPAA as individuals for a very long time. And then like supply chain, we see the NIST framework that has been renamed CMMC in supply chain, and we're starting to see adoption of CMMC in other vertical markets because it's based on NIST and it has a set of criteria that are very focused on data management, data protection. And so I believe that CMMC and derivatives of CMMC are going to become uh, very robust across vertical markets and very well accepted. Different markets will go through certification for that framework, and some markets may use it just as a baseline to understand and manage their information and protect it against critical threats. As that foundation was really designed to keep our adversaries in the United States from stealing critical information from supply chain manufacturing, weapons manufacturing. It really fulfills almost any vertical market.
Yep. And while many verticals not related to the government may adopt that just as best practice based on definitions and evolution, there are also deadlines for government contracted organizations coming up even this year on having different levels of certification in CMMC so that you can maintain your ability to deliver on government contracts, especially those relating to defense and things like that. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you think? What do you think businesses can do to future-proof themselves? Is it adoption of CMMC and other things like Zero Trust, or are there other steps they can take?
Yeah, I think it's still similar to this conversation today. If an organization can understand where its weaknesses are and where its potential threats are, adoption of things, like a framework, like Zero Trust, um, endpoint protection, um, continuous monitoring capabilities to understand if they're under attack, vulnerability management. So there's about 4 or 5 topics that I think are critical to an organization to adopt quickly that will start to close the doors. There is no silver bullet. for this, right? You and I have been in this a long time. So you can't just say, because I have MFA, I'm going to be protected against malicious actors getting into my system. Not true, right? It's one of the pieces to protect you, but you need something else. And so, it's a layered approach. Security has always been that way, but managing your expense and managing the overhead for that tooling and looking at, I would say, expertise in the market to provide capabilities, services, management is really the trend versus trying to do it yourself.
100%. It's all a balancing act of the invisible cost of risk versus the actual cost of tooling. We have time and time again seen customers who are under the impression that because I haven't been hit yet and I have some tools in place that I'm not going to be hit. But with attacks on the rise, it's really for any organization on the market today, it's not a question of if, but when. Even the most secure organizations we've seen from things like the MGM breach and other things over the last few years, even the most secure organizations can be attacked. And if you make money and are connected to the internet, there are bad guys out there that have a profound interest in doing so. So a few key points that I'd like to reiterate from the session. Number one, probably the biggest takeaway is understand what you have today, understand the level of risk you have today, understand the compliance that is required of you by government entities and industry, understand the tooling you have in place, and your first step towards a better path is assessing what you have, mapping what you have, and mapping your gaps towards an ideal state so that you can make the plan towards building that next step. And if you are already mature, if you already have plans in place, bringing in expert guidance to help you take that next and more complex step, bringing in tools for better and more robust visibility and monitoring. These are all ways that you can advance your cybersecurity posture and adopt better cyber risk and cyber threat management practices. All right, and with that, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's watching, and I'd like to say thank you as well, Brian, for your time being here. I'd like to say for anyone that's watching this session, we are going to offer a free 60-minute consulting session with our experts to just have a discussion around risk management, threat management, and cybersecurity features. We can also specifically around the CMMC and regulatory practices offer a 30-minute session with a registered practitioner to talk about next steps in program development. Brian, anything else you'd like to add before we close?
I really appreciate it, Zach. Good conversation today. And if anybody has any questions for either of us, that we're available to re-engage. So thank you.
Absolutely.